Hi everybody, welcome to Dandelion Cottage and Watercolor Wednesday. I'm Leslie Watkins. Today I thought we would do something a little bit different. I've got this beautiful iris that has actually two buds, one that just opened and one on its way out. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the initial drawing that I do to prepare for a watercolor sketch. So I thought we could do that together. So let me get my pencil. And this is a number 2 pencil, just a 2B. It's got some glue on it, of course. And I have a kneaded eraser. Now I keep my kneaded erasers in this little bag because if I don't do that, one of my cats will grab it and run away with it, and then I find it all covered with debris from being kicked around the house. So I want to keep it neat as possible. So what I'm doing is I'm just pulling on the eraser, and this does a couple of things. First of all, it's releasing any graphite that it may have picked up. So graphite is the name of the substance that's inside your pencil lead. It's not actually lead anymore. Used to be lead. I have some old lead pencils and they're wonderful. But the as you use excuse me, let me I think it's coffee time. Cheers everybody. Do you have your coffee? All right, let's see how that works. Anyway, it also as you clean your kneaded eraser, you're also softening it. So this kind of handling warms it up, makes it a little more malleable, and it helps it to work better. And then what you can do is you can form it into any shape you like. So you can make a little point like that, so you could get into tiny little areas. Another thing I like to do is kind of press it into a little pad, and then I can just use that to blot up excess graphite and dust off the paper. And the reason why you want to use the kneaded eraser is because it's so gentle on the paper. It's not going to be abrasive and disturb the surface. And sometimes these pink erasers can leave behind a residue or a little smudge. They get old, they get brittle, and they get hard to use. So the kneaded eraser is really the way to go with your pencil sketches on your good paper. All right, so I'm going to grab, let's see, what do we have here? I have a sketchbook, so I'm going to hold on while I grab my sketchbook. And this is not great paper, but it's a recycled paper, and sometimes you just want something for things that you're not going to save. So I'm going to use this today. What I do like about this sketchbook is that it's got a spiral binding, and it has, does it? Oh no, it doesn't. Okay, so I like a spiral binding because it's just easier when you're sitting outside and sketching to turn the page over like that. Now, as I look at my iris, and I'm going to take it out so I can get a better look at it, you can see it's got 3 petals. All right, and this is a Siberian iris, and I think you can see the beautiful pattern on the edges. So it's almost like a kind of a rusty kind of a texture. These are all very, very fine lines. It's absolutely gorgeous, and the color is spectacular. And then it has this little kind of a center hood, and looks like I've got, somebody built a little house in here. So it's all stuck together, and there's some kind of a little cocoon action going on inside, so very interesting. Here's the one that's on its way out. Okay, so you can see it's starting to wither, and these petals are losing their moisture, they're curling up. All right, so, but the main thing to notice is that it has 3 petals. So different flowers have different numbers of petals. Oftentimes you'll see something that has 5 petals. That generally means that it's in the rose family, because the original single roses have 5 petals. And the other thing that's very distinctive about the iris is this wonderful sort of a space that the bud emerged from. And not only is it interesting to look at because of its shape, but it's also got some beautiful coloration on there. So you can see it's got like a little reddish tinge to it. And then the stem is quite sturdy. This is a stiff stem. And the leaves are these kind of long sword-shaped leaves with the pointy tips. So I'm going to zoom you down so you can see a little bit better. It may be a little hard for you to see at first because the lightness of the graphite, because I like to start out working very lightly and then progressively get darker as I become more and more sure of my drawing. And just checking that you can see everything okay. Move this back a little bit. All right. So I'm going to put my, too bad I don't have an extra hand here. I could hold the iris in my other hand. I'm going to see if I can prop it. Oh, this works. Look at that. I've propped my stem inside the spiral of the sketchbook, and that's holding the iris perfectly for me. Now I can get a good view. So there's a brand new tip, something I've never thought to do before. You can see that the iris is casting a shadow on the page. So I'm just going to turn this slightly so I have an area here that's not obstructed by the shadow. Now, the 3 petals are pointing in different directions. So if you think about a clock face with 12 being at the top and 6 at the bottom, this petal is pointing towards 2 o'clock, and I've just got the center vein of that petal indicated. This petal is heading off to 5 o'clock, and this petal is sort of at 9:15. If you get what I'm saying. It's not really 9:15, but like 9 plus a little extra. And this one is sort of curling around, so I only see the edge where the curl is. I don't see the tip on that one. So that's my overall shape. And I'm going to see if I can make this a little bit darker than I normally would, just so that you can see it. So now that I've got my sort of very light sketch, I can just increase the pressure on the pencil. I'm still not, I'm not digging it into the paper, but I'm being a little more firm, and I think you can see that pretty well. The petals have this kind of a division where there is that half that has that beautiful kind of a rusty pattern on the edge. Then there's this kind of a really spectacular design and then it curls into that magnificent kind of an amethyst violet. And some of these petals, they're getting a little bit older, so they're getting some little tears and little sort of particular characteristics, and it's always good to include those for extra interest. Tells a little more of the story of this particular specimen. Now here, as this petal curls around, there's also an angle, and I'm paying attention to that angle. So if you make some guidelines as you're looking at that angle that the edges of these petals fall on, that will help you to get more of a likeness. All right, I'm going to give you a quick zoom in. So you can see where I'm at here. All right, so that's the beginning. Now I also have this central cluster here, and this also has 3 petals. Now it may be that these are the true petals. I haven't done my botanical reference to check, but it may very well be that these inner petals are the true petals and these outer ones are called something else, and I'm not 100%. So you can get some wonderful botanical anatomy reference that will explain all the different parts, but for the sake of today's video I just want to really concentrate on the drawing part. Now on the inside here, as I look down into the center, I can see a sort of a circular area that goes down into the flower, and then these petals kind of grow up and out of there, but there's a little bit of a bend, so it's sort of like a funnel, and I imagine that is used to help funnel the pollinators in there. All right, and don't quote me on that because I'm not sure, but that's what it looks like to me. Now here's an example of using the kneaded eraser. So if you see, it's I've been holding it in my hand as I'm drawing, and it's gotten very soft and very stretchy, and that's great. So what I can do is I can take this nice clean surface now, and I can just gently blot the excess graphite, and my drawing is much lighter. So there is the graphite on the eraser. And by the way, if you are someone who's interested in getting the Watercolor Paintbox Starter Kit, you get a really nice kneaded eraser in that kit with a case, and that will help to keep it nice and clean. And you'll be less likely to have it stolen by one of your little friends like I do. All right, and then the other thing I would do would be to remove these angle lines that I put in to kind of guide my way. All right, now if I were going to be painting this specimen today, I would leave the sketch as is. That's enough information there for me to continue painting. But I'm not going to paint today. This paper is not watercolor paper. As I mentioned, it's just a kind of a scrappy sketchbook, so I'm not too concerned about that. So if I were to just do some sketching without the addition of water, I could take the pencil and I could go a little darker now. And I would do this just the same as I would with watercolor, where I would do it in a light, medium, and dark stage. So some of the prominent features here that I want to make sure that I capture are these center kind of ruffles on the petals. So the petals kind of undulate. They've got this central pattern, and then there is some shade where these little bumps turn away from the light. Also, my light is, I've got light coming from one direction. So my light is coming from the north, from my big window, and it's casting a shadow over here on the right side of the flower. So what does that mean? It means that I can begin to indicate the shadow side. So this petal sort of curves. So as it curves down into the center of the flower, it gets a little bit darker. So I can put a very light tone on that. Over here, the same thing. I can add a tone to this side of the petal. And then this petal is almost entirely in shade. So there's just a little bit of light catching in there, but all of this is turning under. And I'm using the side of the point of my pencil, and you see where I'm holding my pencil? I'm holding it way up. I'm holding my pencil way up in the middle of it, so that I'm not clutching the point and digging into the paper. I'm just holding it way up at this end, and that, let me give you a better view. That is allowing a range of motion with my wrist. Okay, I'm not just using my fingers, I'm using my wrist and I'm moving my arm all around. As I look down into the center of the flower, it gets darker, more shadowy. Each of these things has a light side and a shade side. This one, I'll zoom you back. This one is curled over on itself, so all of this is very dark in the shadowy recesses here, and then this tip or this edge is in light. So as this petal goes down into shadow, it meets the lit edge of this little inner petal. So I'm just making my way, just observing the details, where the veins are in the outer portion of the petals. I want to indicate that beautiful design on the edge. This one is covered up. Okay, so at this stage, I'm sort of in the middle here. So now what I want to do is to start to pick out some of the darker areas and the patterns. And there's this beautiful little kind of a fan-shaped design that is white, just right where the outer petal or the outer portion of the petal begins. Now, even though this area is quite dark, because it's that deep, rich violet tone, I have to reserve some of my darkest darks for the accents within that area. Okay, so as I build up these values, I'm still not going as dark as I can. I'm holding some my darkest values in reserve. A little bit of a cast shadow here from that central cluster of petals, so I can get a little added darkness there. I want to capture the edge of this. I want to reserve that tiny area there that's catching just a little bit of half light. Looking for those designs, that fan-shaped design. And my darkest dark on this petal is going to be right along here. And I'm just going to let that fade off into the distance as it curls away from me. And there is a kind of a rough little edge here, so I can capture some of the details of that going back over here. Sort of indicate some of that beautiful patterning. I'm also using a little bit of contour drawing, so this petal turns away, so the lines that I'm making to shade that are curving around with the shape of the petal to help indicate what's happening there, so that it reads better to the viewer. Same on this side. There's a little notch here that I want to include. This petal has a little extra little point sticking out the side there. I can really see the pattern on this one. And that gorgeous fan-shaped design. Now when I'm doing a painting, if I'm doing a watercolor painting, I'm thinking exactly the same way as I am now with the drawing, except that I'm doing it with paint. So the concept of form and the movement of light is just the same, regardless of whether I'm using pencil, watercolor pencils, oil paints, whatever the case may be. It doesn't matter. These are the essentials of fine art, the foundational concepts that you want to learn when you begin to study traditional art. Alright, so this is coming along pretty well. I'm going to do a quick clean up, and I'm going to start to tighten up on some of my edges now. So for that, going back to my kneaded eraser, making that point, and I can get into all of these little spaces. If you find that your drawing is getting too dark, you can go back in again and blot it. So to do that, I would just pull on my eraser, get it nice and smooth, flatten it out. So I had a nice little pancake, all right, and then I could just use that to firmly press and remove the excess graphite, and that's going to lighten up those areas. So for instance, this is my petal that's in light. This section of this petal is in light. The side over here. Okay, so I can make these very subtle adjustments. So now I'm starting to get a feeling of light passing over the form of the iris and curling around into shade. You can see on my hand, so if I cup my hand and just move that facing the light and then turn it slowly into shadow, you see what happens. Okay, so it's the same thing with the flower, same thing with the drawing. You want to be able to depict that. So my drawing is pretty much complete. I have my light side, I have my shadow side. The last thing I want to do is to just go into some of these areas where it's a little bit darker, where there's a little more detail, capture some of those characteristics, reinforce my my drawing that I have to so that it reads, and by reading I mean that people will be able to look at it, they can identify it as whatever the subject may be, that it is a convincing form in space. Now my point is starting to get a little bit dull. So this would be a good time to get my pencil sharpened. I'm just going to grab another one that I have here to my side that already has a pretty good point on it, so this one looks pretty good. And that's going to help me to get into these little tiny areas. So even this little tiny thing has a light side and a shadow side. Even the petal has a thickness to it. It has a side plane. And all of these details, this attention to detail, is going to make the drawing more credible. Now I want to take advantage of this dark in here that's being cast by this central petal, and just clean that edge up so it makes better sense here. So this is an area where I'm not afraid to get quite dark. There are a few accents in here behind this little ruffle. Now this is your basic number 2 pencil. I'm sure you've got these all over the place in your house, in your junk drawers, wherever. There are drafting pencils that get much darker. So the darkest dark that I can get with the number 2 pencil is this sort of silvery gray color. But there are other drawing pencils that will enable you to get even darker, more of a black, rich black line. I just want to make a nice smooth transition here. And then let this fade off as it goes away. Excuse me. I haven't paid a lot of attention to this little petal, so let me give that some TLC. Again, the center gets dark in there, but then down at the very bottom of this central cup here, I can see a little bit of transmitted light. So this is the light that is passing through some of these petals and just capturing a little tiny bit of light at the bottom of that cup. And this is all dark. All right, so my darkest areas where I have my accents are under here, where this petal is kind of curling over and creating this cast shadow on the inside. Over here, where this central petal is casting a shadow onto the petal that's underneath it. And over here, where this petal turns into shadow, I can just sort of blend that a little bit better, and the same thing over here. So there is my iris. Now you may want to add a stem. So this, you want to identify where the center of your flower is. So in this case it's right here, and that stem is going behind this petal, and then it comes out over here somewhere. So I can just indicate that. I know it's in shadow. I'm just going to get a little bit of a tone on there. Over here there's a shadow of the flower being cast on the stem, so there can be a gradation, a little bit darker where the shadow is, and then it gets lighter as it emerges into the light. And even though I don't have a leaf attached here, I could go ahead and I could just add a shape. And just indicate what the iris leaves look like. I'm just putting a little tone on there. I'm just going to let this go off into the background. And as I look more closely at the leaves, I can see that there's a very, very fine kind of a rough texture, but they're more smooth than they are textured. But I can indicate the direction of that texture, which is the up and down the length of the leaf. And finally, just for the sake of design, maybe we want to have another leaf coming through here. Passing underneath here. And there you have it. Okay, so that is, I hope, helpful for you to get started with your sketchbook. My wish for you, is that you grab a pencil, an eraser, and a sketchbook, and you get outside and you do some careful observation of nature. You can apply the same concepts to whatever it is that you're painting. It could be a butterfly, it could be a hummingbird, it could be a little sparrow, it could be a tree, a flower, a leaf, whatever you like. If you're not, if you don't have access to a lot of things like that, hit your refrigerator. Get a head of broccoli out of your refrigerator, or an onion, or a piece of garlic. All of those things are going to make wonderful subject matter for you to practice your drawing skills. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that gave you some food for thought. And if you are interested in getting the Watercolor Paintbox Starter Kit that contains a pencil and a kneaded eraser, as well as all the things that you need to get started with watercolor, you can find the contents and a lot more information at watercolorpaintbox.com. So check that out. There is one spot left in my watercolor Nature Studies and Watercolor Workshop coming up this Saturday. So if you're in the area and you'd like to come join me, you can contact 5 Points Art Center in Torrington, Connecticut, and you can register and grab that spot. So I hope to see you there. Thank you so much for joining me today. Stay well, stay creative, stay happy, and I will see you next time.